Okay. Good evening and welcome. I wish you all well and make sure that you're happy and healthy. On behalf of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the Alpha Alpha Lambda chapter, we bring you a Voteless People is a Hopeless People community panel discussion. Education, empowerment, and enlightenment. My name is David Campagna, a Voteless People is a Hopeless People committee chair. Along with the committee members, we thank you for your time and energy this evening. Before I get started, I would like to give a brief introduction of our fraternity and the Voteless People is a Hopeless People national program. Since the founding on December 4th, 1906, on the campus of Cornell University, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated has supplied voice and vision to the struggle of African Americans and people of color around the world. The aims of our fraternity are both direct and powerful: manly deeds, scholarship, and love for all mankind. Our mission? Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated develops leaders, promotes brotherhood and academic excellence, while providing service and advocacy to our communities. Alpha Phi Alpha, the first intercollegiate Greek-lettered fraternity established for African-American men, was founded by 7 college men who recognized the need for a strong bond of brotherhood among African descendants in this country. The Alpha Alpha Lambda chapter that I am part of, and many of the gentlemen on this call, was founded on October 13th, 1923 by 14 Alpha men. This chapter is both the oldest chapter in New Jersey and one of the largest chapters in the Northeast, with over 100 active members. A Voteless People is a Hopeless People was initiated in the 1930s as one of the several national programs of Alpha. At this time, many African Americans had the right to vote, but were prevented from voting because of poll taxes, threats of reprisal, and lack of education about the voting process. For the last 90 years, voter education and registration have remained a dominant focus of our fraternity's outreach activity. In the 1990s, the focus shifted to include political awareness and empowerment, delivered most frequently through town halls and forums like this one. This evening, we have, in this case, 3 dynamic, powerful panelists, each with experience, knowledge, and unique perspective on community engagement, local politics, and voter rights. Let me take the time to introduce you to our panelists. Brother Cleveland E. Beckett Jr. is a member of the Alpha Gamma Lambda chapter of the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. He holds 2 positions: Vice Chairman, National Commission of Politics and Civic Engagement, and Chairman, Eastern Region Commission on Political and Civic Engagement. He also owns his own firm, Beckett Strategic Communications, and he has extensive experience in governmental relations, public policy analysis, civic engagement, leadership capacity building, and campaign management. Please welcome me in welcoming Mr. Beckett Jr. Marilyn D. Davis is the New Jersey State Director of Government Affairs. Her specialties include political organizing, strategic partnership, and fundraising. As a former congressional staffer and state government official with policy and programmatic management experience, she's a seasoned political professional with campaign experience on presidential, statewide, and legislative campaigns. And do we have Mrs. Crump? Is Mrs. Crump on the line? Okay. All right. So we'll get ourselves started. So thank you both for coming on. If you're not speaking, if you put yourselves on mute, that'll be great. And I'll try to do that as much as possible. So the first question to the panel: as we all know, we are living in unprecedented times. We're in the middle of a pandemic. with COVID-19. Our small businesses are crashing. This is also a census year, so there needs to be even more community involvement. So I asked the panelists, as people of the community, what seems to be the biggest hurdle in trying to get people to vote, particularly people of color and people in the inner cities, like that population in Newark? I will go to Ms. Davis first. What are your thoughts?
So there is voter apathy because voters are feel as if the political structure is not working for them because they can't really see it, touch it, feel it. So there is some voter apathy. There is some concern that that whether it's the Republican Party or Democratic Party, they're not working for us, the community. But I hope that COVID has demonstrated to the community that it doesn't matter who's in leadership, and especially how COVID has impacted Black and Brown communities disproportionately to other communities. So if people were feeling disenfranchised before COVID, I hope that now that they have seen the impact that COVID and having the wrong leadership in office can affect the community, I hope that now people understand the importance of leadership and competent leadership.
Brother Beckett, love to get your thoughts.
Sure. So succinctly, I definitely believe that voter apathy, unfortunately, is an age-old challenge in many respects. I think obviously when you look in terms of COVID-19, as Ms. Davis mentioned, you have a couple of different concerns. One, obviously, people do not see the instant level of connectivity between voting and how it structurally changes their community. I would say, though, that when you look at it, COVID-19 has dramatized even more the effects of how, if you are not engaged, when you see a lack of investment in the infrastructure, so like urban hospitals, urban schools, employer training and development programs, all of these things are byproduct of policies. These policies are determined by people who are in office. The people in office are responsive if you hold them accountable to those who participate in the process. I don't think, when you look at it in some respects, it's almost like a imperfect storm to have the situation with voting, the enumeration of the census, and COVID all at the same time. And unfortunately, it means that if we are continuing along a path of not being engaged, regardless of the party, it's going to exacerbate traditional trends that have been going on for decades. And we simply cannot allow that to happen. It's not necessarily the importance about the candidates above, but when you recognize the drama and the fear that people have with respect to all the things that you mentioned, it's incumbent upon organizations like us on the phone and those who are viewing to continue the fight despite the challenging circumstances.
Thank you, Brother Beckett. It's interesting that we talk about voter apathy, and it seems like this has happened. You know, this is not only happening in this election, but again, it's been happening for the last 90 years, where there's been this voter apathy and people really being disengaged. So as people of the community, be it from the governmental side or from the nonprofit side, what are some of the things that we need to continue to do? What are some of the things that we should do differently in trying to get more voter engagement? And I would like to break it down actually into a couple of categories. There are the young voters, the new voters. There are the established voters, the people that they know politics, they understand politics, and are generally engaged. And then we have our older population and our older voters. What is a strategy, or what is a thinking, a plan of sorts that can be used by the various organizations that are represented here, or governmental assistance to increase that voter knowledge? as we all know, it's not only the presidential election that's happening. We're voting for senators and congressmen and congresswomen. We're voting for an entire slate of individuals. How do we, and what can we do as a community, as an organization? What can we do to reduce that apathy and increase that knowledge so we can get that engagement? Brother Beckett?
Sure. So I'm going to look at this from the aspect of a nonpartisan organization, as well as someone who's worked like on the government side and been a lobbyist and things of that nature. So from the lobbying perspective, depending upon what you're taught to focus on shared interests, right? And so you want to make sure that the electorate and policymakers understand what your interests, and hopefully there's a marriage between those two issues, right? And so you'll develop things from town hall meetings. You'll have civic engagement activities. One thing which we no longer do in the schools in most municipalities is have a demonstrated civics program. I think the advent of COVID may provide an opportunity for something like that to reoccur, especially in terms of utilizing technology, right? In terms of producing voter apathy in terms of not-for-profit and I think with the fraternity, I think these town halls are great, but I think oftentimes too many organizations, regardless of affiliation, they want to wait until the presidential election. They want to wait to the mid-year election. And the reality is you need to have these types of activities year-round, and then do what many organizations do not do. Have milestones in which you measure your effectiveness, I'd say within the 6-month interval, so that therefore the organization knows if their community engagement is effective and it has social impact. And then lastly, depending upon your organization, some have more direct action relation than others. I think then you have a greater opportunity to not only A, survey the people that you're working with, and C, if you can have and work together on programs that maybe the community builds from ground up, and then you'll have greater social and community impact, as opposed to necessarily the not-for-profit saying these are our ideas and fitting in the community according to that matrix.
Thank you, Mr. Beckett. Ms. Davis?
I'm going to piggyback on what Brother Beckett just said, and that is have a plan. Have a plan of action of how you will, what are your goals for the next 4 years, 2 years, next year when it comes to community engagement. Develop a plan and have benchmarks, as Brother Beckett said, with goals. You want to reach out to the churches, you want to reach out to the juke joints, you want to reach out, lay out your plan so that you can, one, identify who identify your audience, but two, also identify your key partners and stakeholders in that outreach effort, right? I think it's very important that we reach, so if your target audience are young people, you have to go where young people go. Right. And if that's on TikTok, if that's off of social media, if that's at the juke joint, you go where they go. If you're looking for older voters, you tend to find them in the churches, right? So you got to identify the churches where they are and engage with the leadership of the churches. But in order to bring people to the table, you have to know where to find them and then go where they are. We can't hide behind our desks. We can't hide behind our computers. We can't hide behind our degrees, because we're not the majority, we're the minority. And so we have to figure out where our people go. If they go to Bonda's Kitchen in Newark, let's go to Bonda's Kitchen. If they go to Club 117, we have to go where they go. But more importantly, once we get their attention, we then have to expose them to how the process works. So once that person gets elected, let's take them to Washington, to Cory Booker's office. Let's take them to Trenton so they have an opportunity to visit with Governor Murphy. And let's take them to the mayor's office in Newark so they have an opportunity to engage with him and understand what are their priorities, what are their plans for the community, and how can we be a partner in that, in their efforts to make sure that the Black community in particular is not left out of the process.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that. And just to further extend that, you mentioned we have to go to where the people are. Be it online, be it at church, be it at the restaurant. But one of the things that at least I've noticed, and several people in the committee have noticed, is it's sometimes very difficult to have a nonpartisan conversation in trying to get people to vote. It's very, well, it seems that most people don't want to hear and want to engage in that particular conversation. Where, you know, again, we are a nonpartisan organization, so we want you to register to vote. We want you to understand, you know, who those candidates are and vote for whoever you want. But that seems to be a much more intimate conversation, a much more in-depth conversation in times where, guess what, you know, we're not even meeting face to face anymore, and people's attention is actually kind of short. What do you say to that? What do you say? What should be our engagement model, you know, going forward? Because just saying register to vote it is actually not enough. I mean, there needs to be education, but what's the engagement model? How do we make it relevant to them, to our constituents, to us, really?
So I'll jump in, Brother Beckett. There are organizations that are already doing this. When I was in fundraising, I learned I don't have to reinvent the wheel. Organizations like Emily's List, they already have programs. They've already done market studies. They've hired these professionals to tell them how to solicit funding, right? There are organizations that have already developed plans and have done polling and have done focus groups to figure out how to communicate with that particular audience that you're seeking. So for instance, you can align yourself with the NAACP. The NAACP has a person who's responsible for the youth and college division. They've already hired consultants to do focus groups and polling around youth issues so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can just align yourself with them. There are opportunities for you to learn. NAACP is one organization. If you want to speak to the business community, the National Urban League, they've invested again in all these tools and resources to help understand what messaging works for those the various demographics of its small businesses. They've already done the work. So just align yourself with organizations who are and organized labor. Many of us come from government. So whether you're a teacher, get involved in NJEA or NEA at the national level. They've already done all the work that needs to be done on these issues. All you have to do in a nonpartisan way is align with other nonpartisan organizations who've already invested the money and the resources into messaging, focus groups, and polling. And then all you have to do is take what they put together and tailor for your community. And most of them have messages that's specific to the Black community. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
You know, I truly love Ms. Davis's response because it was so comprehensive, right? When she mentioned about the NAACP, the NAACP is one of the better organizations when it comes with respect to policy on issues of that nature. You know, I used to work for the NAACP and their voting fund, voter rights fund, and at one time was a regional coordinator for the prison project. But there's also, as she mentioned, even though there's research out there, oftentimes when you hear these traditional pollsters, they really don't do a significant job of polling the Black community. And now especially when you see a rising millennial class, you oftentimes don't see any respective data regarding that. I'll give you one though. The Texas Southern University just recently did a report entitled The Black Millennial, a report on millennials and voting. I would urge everyone to look at that because, in answer to your question, Brother Campagna, messaging is important. And even though you've had prior studies done, sometimes at a granular level, if you're sponsoring that particular activity, need to understand, even at the granular level, what's being said and who are the organizations that are the validators. And then secondarily, even though I agree with you, it is challenging because people automatically want to get in a partisan activity, but it's incumbent upon a chapter, whether it's the NAACP branch or Alpha chapter, to have continuous training to make sure that regardless of if the conversation becomes partisan, that you steer it in a nonpartisan way. I'm a member of the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem, and I remember doing a lot of voter registration education with them. And I used to tell people all the time, you know, even when President Obama was running, I said, you know, with all due respect, it's not about Obama, but it's about your mama. In other words, you had to make sure that you have a centrality of focus. And we have a centrality of focus, and even if you do scorecards, that will keep at least a discussion on an even kill, comparison, contrast. As long as you have information on all of the people running, and you can show that you reached out to all of them, one, you'll be on safe space, and two, that's a simpler way without getting a huge dialogue about keeping the conversation on track with respect to nonpartisanship on your part. The person who's registering, they could be partisan. The person who's receiving the information, they could be partisan. But if you're a nonpartisan organization, you always want to steer the conversation in that respect and allow them to make their own mind.
10-11.
Thank you, Brother Beckett. For those that are not speaking, if you could put your phone on mute, I'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
I got to put my phone on mute because they can hear me.
As this is a community event, this is from the community by the community. I want to make sure that everyone on this call, if you have a question in regards to voter registration, the entire voting process, by all means, use the chat function. I have the chat open. If you have any questions to ask, please put your question there, and then I will ask the panelists. I do want to shift a little focus, still talking about obviously the entire process, but I want to talk about a population that's in many ways disenfranchised. I'm talking about the folks that are homeless. I'm talking about the folks that happen to be in nursing homes. The folks that are under state care. What can we do as a community to engage them, to assist them? Because I am sure that, you know, not many people are thinking of them, and maybe they are alone. Maybe they are, you know, being taken care of from the state. Maybe their families are long gone. What can we do to help that population? And I would even say, you know, the immigrant population that doesn't want to get counted, they don't want to get involved in anything. They want to keep kind of like low and slow. They want to keep their head down and not do much. What can we do? What can we do with those folks? Because that may be, that's a missed opportunity, or I should say it's a great opportunity if we're able to leverage it. What are some of your ideas there?
So I'll say in Newark, Mayor Baraka and his aide, Kim Gilchrist, is doing an amazing job outreaching and organizing the homeless community. So for those of you who are interested in homeless outreach, I would connect with Mayor Baraka's office. There are probably some lessons learned that we could benefit from him. There is, for young people aging out of foster care, that's another group that hasn't been tapped. I would suggest connecting with organizations, and especially leaders like Congresswoman Karen Bass from California. She's been a big advocate for the youth aging out of the homeless, youth aging out of foster care, and especially those of us who are, you know, have backgrounds in social work. It's a great opportunity to engage with the youth, to give them some direction, give them guidance, and help them get the support they need. Definitely the nursing home community. Again, there are, especially in the Northeast in particular, where we do have labor unions like SEIU or AFSCME 1199J, whose workers work with nursing home residents. Connect with those kind of groups and see how can we support your clients. So there are organizations, and if you're talking about state custody, as far as those who are incarcerated, again, there are I think the PBA, AFSCME in particular. Those are two unions that come to mind that work with those populations. But you can align yourself with those organizations who deal with that clientele to see how you can support the clients.
I have nothing further to add on that point. Very well stated.
No, thank you, Ms. Davis. Dr. Peters has a question. I'm going to unmute you. Can you state your question?
If we can't see you, we're not answering your question.
He's good. He's good.
How are you? So I'm just thinking about college students, and I wonder, my question is, how can college students get their peers to get active in the voting process and actually register to vote? How can they help them feel like it's something worth doing now?
So most college campuses have a partisan Democratic organization as well as a partisan Republican organization. And again, the NAACP does have college chapters, and they have at the national level someone who is the director of Youth and College Division for the NAACP. So those are three opportunities for college students to plug into the political process. 9 times out of 10, if they're a political science student, they're already plugged in because their professors tend to be involved as well. But certainly working with the, I don't know if it's called, whatever the Democrats group is called in colleges, Young Democrats, I think it's called, and the Republican version, whatever that is. But absolutely, the NAACP is a resource for young people to plug in and understand the issues as they impact Black people.
The other way that I would add is being involved in terms of getting with respect to internships. I think actually, in many respects now, getting young people involved is not the challenge that it has been, because when you look at all of the incidents that have occurred, young people have been involved in terms of protesting and things of that nature. I think the issue is making sure that their engagement is effectively channeled in a way that keeps them, one, continuously interested, right? Two, getting them to understand that there are milestones, there are levels to this. In other words, just because you're involved in the direct action campaign one day doesn't mean that the problem is going to go away. And so also when I would say there are probably greatest resources in some respects because they're willing to dramatize the activity and the activism in a visible way. Those who have done it previously may not be as visible in some degrees, but they still have a wealth of wisdom to pass on. So young people also need to be receptive to hearing about how to engage in specifically targeted activities that have milestones. And I think with that, we're in good shape.
I also just want to add, there are opportunities to, again, expose young people to things that are happening across the country. So for instance, we're right across the bridge from New York. Tamika Mallory, I think her group is called United Freedom. They're constantly marching or protesting or organizing, not only in New York. I mean, she's been very active in Kentucky. There are opportunities to take young people to where the organizing is happening so they can see how it's done, because those protesters are trained before they go out. So there are opportunities to take young people out so they can see the work in action, if you will.
That's an excellent point, because it's almost like an apprenticeship type of program. And I think that's important because in light of what's going on, the level of political upheaval, your excitement and willingness to work, if it's not channeled effectively, if you're not trained on how to do it, can yield unintended consequences. And we want young people and all people to stay away from that.
And I also want to say, we're so close to New York. The National NAACP has their annual board meeting in February in New York, and it's open to the public. You don't have to pay 1 red cent. So you can take young people there. They can be in the room at the board meetings, listen to what's happening, hear all the speakers who are coming and going. The National Action Network, they have their conference every year in April. It is free. They have thousands of people, and if it's a presidential year, they'll have candidates coming through. But it's an opportunity for young people to see Reverend Sharpton off screen, and see the leadership of the NAACP board, which is probably like 50 deep, not larger than that, but an opportunity to see these people up close and personal and hear what they're saying and see what and know what they're doing in the community.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that. Deli Oladipo has a question. Let me unmute you. Go ahead, Deli.
Good evening, everyone. Question on bipartisan information sources. Where would you say are the best places to go to get up-to-date information on the issues at hand that don't really have a political bent to them one way or the other.
Brother Beckett, you want to go with that?
Yeah, I was trying to jot down notes as the good brother president was speaking. Now, one group is the Bipartisan Policy Center. They're based out of DC. I believe that was started with I want to say Tom Daschle and Trent Lott, but I find that they're very good. I think the Brookings Institute, from a research capacity, is excellent. And there's another one, the Urban Institute, because for me, I want to find things about the policy driven, because you don't really understand the politics if you can't explain the policy, and then how would you finance it? Because if you can answer those questions, then you can build a collaboration to effectuate the passage of the policy.
Right.
Now, whether or not you agree with it, well, that depends upon all of the details, but those are at least a couple of organizations that come to mind immediately.
Thank you so much.
So, Deli, I'm really confused. I just gave you all these organizations like the NAACP, the National Action Network, and the Urban League. All these groups are talking about policies that impact Black people. But on top of that, I'll also give you, just for shits and giggles, the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. These are organizations that focus on Black people. So the Joint Center, it's run by a guy, what is his name? I'm a brain freeze. But the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. And truthfully, I would go to Howard University, and also there's this is when you get old. The Ron Walters Center at Howard University is another good resource. I mean, Ron Walters is one of the best political operatives that ever set foot on this earth. Now he's transitioned, but Howard University has a school named after him. Is another good resource. And as far as I look at, as a political operative, we have to follow the news. Politico is a good source to find out what's happening. So Politico, the Hill newspaper, is a good resource. The Washington Post, if you want to know about what's happening politically in the nation, the Washington Post is probably the best paper that's out there. But those are a few resources. But I would seriously, we Black people don't just have to see the value in the NAACP, the National Action Network, or the Urban League, National Urban League. But I can assure you, when I worked in the Obama-Biden administration, they were at the table. And they were at the table talking about issues that impact Black people. Not brown people, not yellow people, but Black people. So if you want to look for resources or organizations that you can follow and find out what's happening, those are the ones I would recommend.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's stay on that topic of information or misinformation. As we have all, if we all just take 15 minutes and watch the news, the local news or national news, or if we look at our various online news sources, you all see that there are major efforts to curtail voting in this country. We're in 2020, and there are still various efforts from various political parties trying to curtail the vote. And I would even say our vote, because it seems like it's affecting the communities of color in a much more adverse way than in other communities. So I go back to where we started, where we have apathy. We have apathy in our ranks, in our people, in our community. And then we see all of this news activity that is further stifling or trying to stifle, the vote in New Jersey, but really throughout the land. This is where people usually, shrug their shoulders and say, you know what, I don't care. How do we engage those folks? How do we engage the people that are actively disengaged? Because there are folks that they can be convinced. They could, they know that this year, they know that this presidency, they know that this time is an unprecedented time. how can we use that to our advantage to re-engage with those folks that are actively disengaged?
Well, you know, I hesitate to say that you have to use the dramatization of fear. That's not how I generally like to organize. But there are clear, stark realities. I mean, this current administration has taken dramatic steps that we haven't seen since, you know, the 60s. I would even argue you could go back almost near pre-Reconstruction. And so from a historical standpoint, I think people understand. The question is, they want to know if they do become engaged, will that make any change? And so there's a concern there, right? There's not an accident that this is all occurring. These acts of reducing polling sites to hurt early voting, of adoption of more stringent voter ID requirements. You have the perfect storm of that. We have the census, the fact that the administration was fighting the census and now cut it off where it stopped on October 15th. Why? Because at the end of the year, if the current occupant is obviously the president, then they will be helping to control the population numbers that are sent to the states. Why is that important? Because that will affect people's funding in a myriad of medical programs, public education. When you are able to explain that to people, they see it in a quite different way. The problem now, though, is you have this additional layer of fear for the immigrant community being participants, right, in the census and voting, and the fact of you have communities that have been put upon for decades now saying, oh yes, we now have to deal with yet another set of circumstances. So again, I think people get it. I think we have to make sure that the organizations that Ms. Davis mentioned, that organizations we're a part of, that we don't suffer from our own apathy. We have to be more ingenious in terms of how we do our level of outreach to people.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we are of the community, in the community, and we have to set that example for sure. It's just again the opportunity. I think part of the reason we are in the place that we are is because in 2016, you know, everybody felt good and everybody felt okay and thought that, oh, we don't need to vote, let the good times roll, and here we are. And it only takes one election, and it doesn't have to be it just happened to be a national election, but it doesn't have to be a national election. It could be the change in your councilman, the change in your mayor, the change in your senator or your governor. All of those are instrumental in changing our day-to-day lives. And
what's also equally as instrumental is the changing demographics.
Absolutely.
And when you see 2030, 2040, America is going to look quite different than the way it looks now. And I would submit humbly that might be part of the reasons why we see these persistent challenges with respect to voting eligibility.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we're coming on to the top of the hour. I asked the audience again, are there any questions that you would like to ask? Any questions that you would like to know about? No question is a dumb question. This is about knowledge. This is about knowledge sharing. This is to make sure that we are better prepared to vote in this coming election. The election is 2 weeks away, and as many of you know, voting is going to be very different this year. You know, all of a sudden we have mail-in ballots. You know, and guess what? It's not as straightforward as people may think. So we need to make sure that we understand how to vote. We need to understand where to vote. We need to understand when to vote. And with that, I would actually like to share a PSA that we created, and obviously we would like to share with the rest of you. Can you all see this?
Mm-hmm.
Around 80,000 people in New Jersey are expected to vote absentee for the upcoming election, but some may not know how to do it. They don't understand the process, but we are here to explain. There are several ways that you can cast your vote, by mail or in person. If you're voting absentee, you must request an absentee ballot. Once you get the ballot in the mail, it will come with 3 envelopes: a privacy envelope, one with an affidavit printed on it, and one plain envelope that has been pre-addressed. Then you should look for the actual ballot. It should look something like this. Make sure you color in the correct bubble next to the candidate you support. Do not put an X, circle, or smiley face. The machine can't and won't read that. After your ballot is filled out correctly, seal it in a secrecy envelope. Then put that envelope inside the affidavit envelope and seal it. The next step is to complete the affidavit that is outside of the envelope and sign it. Very important. Do not wait. Remember, the day before the election is the last day that you can postmark your ballot.
It has to make its way to the absentee office by noon on election day for your vote to count.
For further details, please visit www.nj.gov/state/elections.
Awesome. That's good.
Well, yes, I have to thank the several young gentlemen that are very interested and helped with this and help with the committee. So I would like to thank all of those young gentlemen for this PSA. We're coming up to the top of the hour. What I would like to do is hand the floor over to Ms. Davis and Mr. Beckett Jr. for some closing comments. From there, I will turn it over to our president, Mr. Oladapo, and then we can wrap. Like I said, I want to keep it to an hour, and I know that we're coming up on top of that. So I'll hand it over to Ms. Davis. Thank you for joining. Thank you for your expertise and your knowledge and your time. Take it away.
Well, thank you so much for having me this evening. I just want to wrap up with a few points. One, after November 3rd is when the work really begins. Whether Joe Biden wins or Donald Trump wins, that is when the work begins. Because we have to hold whoever gets elected accountable. And so it's really important that we get organized now, we stay organized, and we hold their feet to the fire after the election. But since I am here, and I am an unapologetic supporter of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, I cannot leave tonight without saying to you that that we need your support. We need brothers to support the sister who is on the ballot and make sure that when she is attacked in the press, that we respond accordingly. We cannot leave her out there. We cannot have elected officials talking about her name and we not respond. So I want to ask my brothers to please do not leave the sister out here. No matter how you feel about her politics or how you feel about her ethnicity, do not leave the sister out here by herself. So I urge you to unite with sisters and others who are supporting her when she's being attacked in the press and being attacked by other politicians.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Thank you. Brother Beckett?
Yes, succinctly, I want to thank President Oladapo, as well as you, Brother Campagna, and all the brothers of Alpha Alpha Lambda chapter for engaging in this activity. I'm not surprised you're one of our leading chapters. And to say that I believe this is a seminal moment. Many of us, we obviously recall when President Obama became the president. And in many respects, perhaps we were lulled to sleep. Well, we've now had a level of a reawakening. And it's up to us collectively to get out the vote in an organized way and fight not just for the Biden-Harris ticket. And I'm a personal supporter, but I also do my nonpartisan politics, and I'm in this capacity here. I'm nonpartisan, but it's also about our values. That's what's on the ballot, our values, whether it's a new Supreme Court justice, whether or not you've seen further segregation in housing and in education. It's about our economy, making sure we have a stable economy. And only if we are an informed electorate can we truly vote in an educated way and then hold people accountable in a responsible way. So I think that's our charge with this particular election. And it's going to take all of us, perhaps more than it ever has before.
Thank
Well,
you.
I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us this evening. Certainly like to thank our panelists, Ms. Davis and Brother Beckett. I'd like to thank Brother Campagna and Voteless People is a Hopeless People Committee. And those for you who may not know, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated has a number of national programs, and Voteless People and Hopeless People has been a national program for decades. It's obviously one of our biggest areas of focus. And although as an organization, we are bipartisan, I can let you know that for me and my family, we are certainly Biden and Kamala Harris supporters. Kamala Harris is in my wife's sorority, so it would be in my best immediate and future interest to be supportive of my sorority sister. But the most important thing that we can do between early voting and on November 3rd is make sure we get out to vote. So many people have sacrificed everything, including their very lives, just so that we have this privilege. So for us not to vote one way or the other is the real tragedy that we need to avoid. So again, thank you all. Stay safe, vote, and let's put the right people in power. Have a great night.
Thank you.
In behalf of Alpha Alpha Lambda and Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, a Voteless People is a Hopeless People Committee, I would like to thank you all for joining. This was great. If you want to get a link to the PSA and a link to this video, please send the email, and I put it into the chat, votelesshopeless@gmail.com. This is actually our second panel discussion. Our first panel discussion was in May of 2020, and if you want to get a link to that one as well, just send the email to votelesshopeless@gmail.com, and I will make sure that you all have the most up-to-date information when it comes to voter registration, voter rights, and what we can do to uplift our community. Again, thank you very much. I really do appreciate your time, and have a great evening. Thank you again. Good night.
Thank you.
Hey.